Welcome to Humans of Animal Care, a collection of audio stories that highlight people who've dedicated themselves to helping animals. Today we'll be hearing from Sam Patera, a registered veterinary technician working in emergency medicine. We learn about Sam's time working as a keeper aide at the Santa Barbara Zoo, how she took the leap to become a registered vet tech, and how she manages imposter syndrome in the field. We discuss the tricky parts of her job, such as having to wear multiple hats and presenting financial estimates. We also hear about some of the wonderful animals Sam has worked with so far.
My name is Samantha Patera, and I'm a registered veterinary technician at an emergency animal hospital. That's it.
Cool. When did you first know you wanted to work with animals, or what drew you to this field?
Well, so I've always loved animals. I grew up with a lot of pets. We had like a bird and fish and cats and dogs. So I grew up around animals. All my family members had animals. And I always knew. I always knew I wanted to work with animals somehow. You know, how every young person who likes animals is like, I'm going to be a vet. And so I definitely started with that. And, that obviously shifted and changed over the years. But I always knew somehow I'd work with animals, and more than likely in a clinical setting. I just think it's fascinating. It's interesting going to the vet with my pets as a youth, and like being exposed also to like my pets being euthanized and things like that. It sounds really sad, but that also just kind of opened my eyes, and always getting our pets from the shelters and those kind of things definitely make you empathetic towards animals and the fact that they're like technically property, and wanting to help them.
So you said that you were more interested in like the clinical aspect. How did you figure that out? Was it just throughout those experiences or something more specific?
Yeah, so I think I realized when I was kind of tandem working at the zoo, I started volunteering as like a keeper aide at the Santa Barbara Zoo, which is it's a really cool program actually for anyone who's interested in working with more exotic and obviously zoo type animals. So I volunteered doing that for a long while, and I also was working overnights at Care in the ER, and when I first was working in the ER, I wasn't sure if that was what I wanted. I basically got out of college. I was working at a Michael's, and like I had to wake up one day. I was like, what the hell am I doing with my life? And I was like, I guess I'll try medicine. Like, I don't want to be a doctor, but like maybe I'll be a nurse. So I just kind of accepted a kennel attendant job. And so when I first started working in vet med, I wasn't sure that I wanted to be in a clinic setting. But after being in the elements at the zoo, you kind of realize that being like knee deep in animal feces and all that, you kind of like, you learn the things that you like about each thing and the things that you don't like. And I loved working at the zoo. I thought it was really awesome. Like I actually was a keeper for a summer there, like had keys and everything. Very official. I did that for a summer because they needed people, and I thought it was really awesome. I got to work with birds, and it was really cool. But I think just throughout that experience, while also working in a clinic, I realized that I prefer indoors, and I prefer just like the slightly more controlled nature of working in a clinic. Although it's an ER, anything can happen. It's just there's a different level of control in an enclosed environment. But I do still love exotics. I think it'd be really cool to kind of meld the two and work at like an exotics clinic, or to work at the zoo as a technician. I think that'd be a really cool like combination of both worlds. But yeah, I think tromping around as a keeper and doing like husbandry work, it was very fulfilling and interesting. I don't know that I would want to do that my whole life.
And you said while you were a keeper, you worked with the birds at the zoo primarily, or like.
Yeah, so basically, when you do the program, well, it's different now. They basically were reworking the entire zoo layout right before COVID, which is when I stopped. I basically volunteered for several years, and then I worked there for a summer, and then I went back to volunteering after they, hired a person into like full time fulfill that job, because I was doing color guard coaching and I was working overnights at the clinic full time, and and the zoo just was not paying enough. I think at that time, this was like 2018, 2019, and they were paying $15 an hour for a full-time zookeeper. And so it was just not feasible. I lived in Santa Barbara at the time. So I kind of went back to volunteering, and then I stopped completely at the end of that, right before COVID hit, they were reworking the whole system at the zoo. So the way it used to be and how I knew it was they had lines, quote, quote, lines. So it was like bird line for like lower. So that you would take care of like the aviaries and the flamingos and certain things were part of lower. The kookaburras, when you first come into the zoo, all of those birds were part of like lower. And the two different aviaries and some of the other like big like bird of prey birds, like there was like the eagles and such that were like part of upper. So then they had like all the falconry stuff. Basically there were two separate sections of birds, and then the big cats had their own lines. So you would work with like the lions, and you would work with the snow leopards and the Amur leopards. Those were all part of one line, and so on and so forth throughout the whole place. And the way they're changing it was, instead of like species based lines, which is how it kind of was, they decided that it was more prudent because it's got like a very large like terrain shift in terms of like it's very uphill. And some of those, the housing exhibits are like the Channel Island fox and turkey vultures are like on a giant sloping hill, the condors and stuff. And just to make it easier for the staff, they started transitioning into like geographical location for the different lines. And so everything in the front lower area of the zoo would be one, and then everything in like the middle left of the zoo would be one, and so on, just to make the keepers' jobs easier so they're not traipsing around the zoo. That was half the job. walking to places, and they just thought it would be more efficient to change it. And then COVID hit. So I have not volunteered since. I don't know. I'm assuming that they implemented that new strategy just to make it simpler for them. But when I was there, I was working a lot with birds. Flamingos are like one of my favorite birds, which is so cool. They stink, but they're awesome. So I worked with the flamingos. That was awesome. I got to work in the aviaries. I got to move parrots. So I was the one who would like take them from their perches in their housing out to the aviaries. So cool. I got to see them like take x-rays on certain things. It was really cool. It was a really fun job. I love birds. I've always loved birds. So certain like the turkey vultures, like you don't go anywhere like in with them ever. And so there's a lot of like secondary enclosures, and like there's a lot of like training, target training that they do with the birds so that they can kind of go into a secondary unit while you go out and clean their enclosure and spray and hose down the unit and pick up any feces or any like carcasses of animals. I know that sounds crazy, but like, because obviously they're carrion eaters, so they eat animals. And those kind of birds were a little scary. I used to go in with the eagles as well, which they were so cute. Betsy, and then I forget the other one's name, but they were like very like obviously like America type names because bald eagle. But they were so awesome, but they were a little skittish, but like they never like bothered me. But that was so cool to be in an enclosure with a bald freaking eagle, dude. Like 30 feet to my left and 10 feet above me was two eagles perched up there. Like that was really cool, was getting to go in with them. Yeah, I don't know. It's just and being in with like the flamingos, that was a big part of the job, was like migrating the flamingos who were like young from their inside out to the big enclosure every morning. Whereas when they're mature and older, they stay out there full time, so migrating the young ones or the ones who like need to go in an enclosure at night for whatever reason. Some of them have like messed up feet and things like that, and they need to like be in an enclosure overnight just for safety reasons. That was always such a fun part. Like we walked the flamingos out to the yard, and yeah, it was, literally they come up to you and they like nuzzle is like the best way I could describe it. Being nuzzled by a flamingo, man, oh, it's the coolest thing. It was fun.
How did you end up knowing you wanted to become an RVT and then actually doing it?
So I didn't know I wanted to be an RVT, actually. It's funny. Cynthia, our old coworker, who taught me a lot of like the basics of all my basic technician training came from her. Like she's the first person who taught me to place a catheter. She basically said, "Hey, I'm going to do this accelerated online RVT program. We're doing these things. We should get paid and get the licensing to do it, on an official basis." And I was like, I don't know, because it was like $5,000. It's expensive and it's all out of pocket. It's not like undergraduate where like FAFSA covers stuff. So I had to come up with that money out of pocket. And thankfully, this was right when COVID started. So I had savings saved up. I had money available to me because I was working so many jobs before COVID hit. So I did that. It was like a 5-month, like super accelerated. When you think of like a regular RVT program, I think they're like 18 months or something like that. And there's a lot of in-person and labs, but because of COVID, labs and things like that weren't really happening anyways. So Cynthia kind of dragged me into the RVT program at Platt College, and we did it online and got through that very quickly. And then I kind of like sat on it. Like I sat on the certification after I passed my schooling at the end of 2020. I kind of sat on it for a little while. And it wasn't until VCA, like this is kind of when like all of our hospital got registered, when VCA kind of put this initiative out of like, we want more of our technicians to become registered. Here's all these pathways to it. And one of them is an alternate route, basically, which is, I don't know if they've closed that now, that way to do it. There's a lot of different opinions in our community about whether licensing from learned experience is equivalent to licensing from a person who's gone through schooling. And as a person who kind of did both, like it was an interesting way to be because I did an accelerated program. So it wasn't technically full schooling. So that wasn't enough for me to sit for the VTNE, which is the national exam. And so I also had to submit like a checklist and have a doctor sign off on all my hours that I had worked at the clinic and done technician skill set things. But VCA was paying for it and they were promoting, they did this big like RVT drive basically. So that's why I kind of was like, okay, I guess I'll do that. So submitted all that stuff. It was a pain in the butt. But once I got like past all of that, I basically was given approval to sit for the exam, pass the exam. Once I submitted that passing score, it took a couple of months for like it to process through the system. And that was it. Like I got my registration number and that was I passed the test at the end of 2021. And so I got licensed at the beginning of 2022. So been licensed since then. That's crazy. Almost 3 years, actually. 3 years of being licensed. But yeah, so I didn't know. I just kind of did it. That's been most of my career with vet med, though, is kind of following the flow of things. And I just take it as I go. And it works out for me so far. For anyone wanting to get into vet med, just do it. Try it out. It's fun. Platt College, I'm sure they do like a regular program like that has a campus. What I did was online learning. And because it was online only, it was an accelerated program. And so basically they shoved 2 years worth of information into a 5.5 month period. Most people don't do accelerated courses. Also, it's so easy for that information to go in one ear and pop right out the other just because of the nature of how fast it is, and that's the one thing that I kind of wish I had done differently. Like if I could have afforded it, it's crazy expensive, like 15 grand plus 20 grand plus to go to like a fully fledged in-person program. But I wish I had the means and the ability to do that because there are things that I wish I had retained and I have to kind of remind myself. There's definitely questions that people ask me about really nitty gritty specific things. And it's like, I don't always have the right answer for those things because my mind could not hold on to every drop of information as hard as I tried. Just in that short of a time, there's just no way. So I'm still learning, even as an RVT, like I still learn every day. And I do my best to try to always be listening when the doctors are speaking and things will jog my memory. I'm like, oh yeah, that is familiar to me. It's not like it's all completely gone, but it's definitely something I wish I had been able to do like the full on schooling. And I wonder if it would be a little easier for me now to have those kinds of more really in-depth medical knowledge of things.
So how do you keep up your license?
Much like doctors, there's a 2-year window between licensing renewal periods. And within that 2 years, you have to complete as an RVT 20 credits, basically 20 hours of race approved credits, which basically like there's an organization that like approves CEs for use towards your licensure. A majority of it has to be like interactive learning. So like 16 hours have to be either like live seminars or you have to do, if you're doing like online stuff, it's ones that have like testing at the end to like prove that you were paying attention. But a lot of people choose to go to like CE conventions. You just have to make sure you give them your licensing information and show up, and the world's your oyster. There's so much CE out there. Doctors have to do something crazy. Like I think it's like 80 hours or something like that, 60 or 80 for their continuing education. We only do 20. But yeah, definitely important to keep up on education. Just in the last 5 years, so much in vet med has changed. And so that's a big part of it and a big requirement.
Do you currently have any future goals or ideas of where you might want to go with your license, or are you happy in emergency medicine?
So like I kind of said before, I'm very like fast and loose with my career in terms of veterinary medicine. I've learned to be a lot more open-minded over time. When I first started, I didn't really want to be a technician. Like I was afraid of the responsibility, and more so just because of like imposter syndrome and feeling like I would never be good enough or I would accidentally mess up, and it literally is life or death. Not every moment of our job is life or death, but so much of it can be. You give them the wrong medication, the wrong dose of medication, and they're sick. There's so much thought and present mindedness that has to go into our job. And so I was afraid to even become a technician. And over the years, I've done a good job at branching out and wanting to learn more things and trying to not be scared to broaden my horizons. But I would say I'm happy with emergency medicine. We're a small hospital, so I can't say like it's never boring because there's definitely days where there's lulls. And honestly, sometimes it's welcome when it's been a crazy week, especially after the holidays. There's so much death and sadness that unfortunately accompanies holiday season in vet med, and it hits you really hard. And so it can be nice to have a little bit of a lull after something like that. But in general, it's exciting and it's interesting. It keeps you on your toes, but in like a good way. I find it extremely rewarding. I think being able to like resuscitate a patient and like it's not very often they come back to life, but like I've had patients that come back and live. And it's, and seeing animals go from being really, really sick to being able to go home to their families and not be sick anymore it's why I love emergency medicine. And for as many sad, really, really sad cases and sad days, even if there's less of the really good ones, it feels like it's worth it for those good ones. I also feel really fulfilled like teaching the youth, the younger generations who are coming up into it. And like I said, I'm still learning myself. So I feel like there are definitely moments where like they'll ask really poignant questions and I'm learning along with them. And I think that that's also really cool where I'm like, I don't know 100% that. Let's go talk to the doctor. Let's look it up. Let's, go on a little adventure here and find out what it's about. And that's really cool in terms of like my own furtherment of my own skill set and my own things that I still am trying to learn. But I just, I'm a coach for color guard and stuff like that. So I really enjoy teaching. I really enjoy helping other people just in general. And so being able to feel confident enough in parts of my job that I can teach others is really rewarding. And it helps my brain feel a little less impostery when I have knowledge and skills that other people appreciate and respect enough to ask, and that I'm approachable and nice enough and willing enough to help people that they want to come ask me for help. Because we all know those technicians who are scary and you don't want to go ask them, or doctors who are scary and you don't want to seem stupid in front of them, so you don't ask. I like to think that I'm the exact opposite of that, and that most of the people I work with feel comfortable asking me questions or coming to me for confirmation. And I love that. So I don't know, maybe like training position or something like that would be cool sometime in the not super near future, but sometime in the future would be cool. I also think specialty is really fun. I think the kind of cases you see in specialty are really fascinating. There's the double-sided coin where a lot of owners and clients for specialty tend to be a little bit type A and very particular, which isn't a terrible thing. It's good. They love their pets and they want the very best for their pets. That's definitely part of the job, is speaking with and handling clients who maybe aren't as nice or who are a little more entitled or who are a little more, well, I pay thousands of dollars for this specialty and I expect answers. And when you don't have answers, it's hard. So that's what kind of holds me back from working with like a specialist. But I think maybe sometime in the future, 10 years down the line or 5 years down the line, it'd be a good experience to add. Yeah, other than that, I mean, I like where I'm at. Like I said, always learning, always open to experiences. If something comes my way, I would be interested in it. So
You mentioned color guard a lot, but also just in general, what do you like to do outside of work? And yeah.
I coach color guard, which is, for people who don't know what that is, it's like, think of like a dancey, artsy form of drill team. We do like a whole show. I don't teach high schools anymore. I used to, but I teach like an independent group, which just means it's not like associated with a school or like an organization. Like we are our own organization. There's no like age limits, which is really cool. It fulfills creative outlet for me, and I really love that. I've been doing that for like 16 years, 17 years. I've been coaching I've been coaching for like 12, 13 years. I've been doing that for a long time. I also, like, my family lives in LA, so I visit them as often as I can. My grandma's pretty old. I like to spend time with her if I can. What else do I do? I read and crochet, but I'm also like, I'm a homebody. I like hanging out with my cats and my partner, and so.
What is something that you wish the general public knew about the field, or just anything you want to share, both the good and bad, that you just wish people knew?
I wish people knew how much we do, like how all encompassing it is. We are everything. In our field, technicians are nurses, and we are every type of nurse. And we run your animal's anesthesia, and people think the doctor's the ones doing everything, which, I mean, all the hardcore stuff, like opening your dog up and performing surgery. But like, if I wanted to, I could close the skin layer of your dog's incision, like the nasogastric tube that your animal has for feeding. I place that. I just think there's so much more that we have to be. I'm a janitor and I'm a receptionist and I'm a therapist sometimes too. And I think people take for granted the people that stand in front of them, presenting them with like a financial estimate, by the way, which is everyone's least favorite thing too. Like none of us like doing that. You think you don't like it because it's expensive. Yeah, we hate it too. I sure hate it. I think that's the other big one. Like, sure, it might seem like a money grab, and like maybe for the corporations it is. Like they're making billions of dollars and I'm out here making 30 an hour. And you heard all the schooling I went through. A lot of people have even more. Veterinary doctors go through so much schooling, and they do residencies and they do internships, the same as human doctors. And there's no like, put some respect on their name. Like put some respect on the people that are here to help you. Like we don't have any decisions over the cost or all these things. We love what we do. We love animals. And if we could open up a free clinic and still get paid, like if the government would pay us to have a free clinic where everyone's pets could be seen and we could just not have to worry about it and we could just have excellent medicine for everyone, we would. Yeah, it's like, be nice. Just be nice to your veterinary staff, man. We're all hanging on by a thread these days. and we're still in it because we love what we do. And even the people who have left the field, they loved it. And it was probably a really hard decision for them to leave. And people should maybe look into it a little bit more and maybe thank your veterinary technician the next time that your animal had to have a catheter and anesthesia done and all these other things, because your technician did all that stuff. So
Are there any cases or animals that have stood out to you throughout your experience, whether at the zoo or at care or anything like that?
in terms of the zoo, we there was this one flamingo who they amputated his little foot, and so we put a little boot on him every day. That was like my favorite little thing, was putting on his little boot. I love that little flamingo, so cute. And, at our clinic, I mean, unfortunately, there's always the cases that are like for sad reasons that you remember, but like some good ones that I remember, like Mika, the vitamin D toxicity cat that we had. She was hospitalized for like 2 months. Basically, she got into her owner's vitamin D supplements, and that basically causes kidney failure. And it's like a long-term issue. Like it's a balancing act of like fluids, but don't fluid overload them because they can develop heart disease, which she did. She like developed a murmur and like was on oxygen support for a while. She had an NG tube because she refused to eat. It's such a long, arduous process that most people, when they find out that their animal has a vitamin D toxicity, they euthanize them because a lot of times they don't make it to the other side without going bankrupt. And they almost gave up pretty early in to her treatment because she was looking so crummy. And I'm so glad they didn't, because she's alive and she does so well, and she's a grumpy little gray cat, and I love her. Who else was? Oh, we had the rattlesnake bite dog, Raja. Her and her son got bit by the same rattlesnake. Her son did well with the antivenom the first time, although he got bit again, by the way, like a year later. Now he's allergic to antivenom too, because he had a really bad reaction, but she had a really bad antivenom reaction. We didn't realize that was what was causing her problems, and she quite literally died. We resuscitated her. Her throat was like swelled up. I had to place a tube down there. Thank God it went into her trachea. Like there was no visibility. And she lived. Like we brought her back. She's still kicking, alive and kicking. So that was a really cool, exciting case that like turned really dire. Like, I mean, a rattlesnake bite is never good, but usually like anti-venom and they survive. But when they're allergic to the anti-venom, it causes a lot of complications. And just this cat, Mr. Whiskers, he was an orange Persian cat, and he was an IM patient, and he would get hospitalized every so often for his really messed up kidney values. He was grumpy and hated everyone, but he and I were homies, and he loved me, and I loved him. Sadly, he passed away eventually. I'll never forget him. He was a good boy. So those are some of those cases that I remember. Some of it's like the medical stuff, but a lot of times it's just like the animals' personalities. Like they're just like the best babies ever. Like Raja was such a good dog, like a pit bull, mind you, and she was just the sweetest, kindest, nicest dog, even though she literally died and came back. Still the best dog. Man, the animals, that's why we do it.
This has been Humans of Animal Care. Thanks for listening.